Okay, I'm back. As soon as you can, let me know if it's any better. Hopefully it will be. I did switch networks. Maybe the other one is having issues. This seem any better? Shalom, shalom. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. So far it is better. Excellent. Somebody messaged Joe. He was frustrated. Okay, I'll give it a few more minutes. Hopefully most of the ones we had will come back on. So far, so good. Excellent. Okay, where were we? Hopefully it'll hold. So as I recall, we were talking about the synagogue life being an echo of the life in the temple, and what we're going to see tonight, hopefully in more detail, is that the temple life is an echo of what goes on in the heavens, up in his throne room. So that's where we're going to end up going tonight, hopefully, after we get through the Tehillim, the Psalms. So, like I said, we left off in day 4, which is Tehillah, Psalm 94. So I'm just going to read it, and then we're going to discuss what hopefully you'll see right off the bat, that it is very prophetic in nature, specifically hearkening to last things. So, God of vengeance, Yehovah, God of vengeance, shine forth. Lift up yourself, O judge of the earth. Render to the proud their recompense. Yehovah, how long shall the wicked exult? They gush out, they speak arrogance. All the workers of iniquity bear themselves loftily. They crush your people, O Yehovah, and afflict your heritage. They slay the widow and the stranger and murder the fatherless. And they say, Yah will not see, neither will the Elohim of Yaakov give heed. Consider, you brutish among the people, and you fools, when will you understand? He that planted the ear, shall he not hear? He that formed the eye, shall he not see? He that instructs nations, shall he not correct? Even he that teaches man knowledge? Yehovah knows the thoughts of man, that they are vanity. Happy is the man whom you instruct, O Yehovah, and teach out of your Torah, that you may give him rest from the days of evil, until the pit is digged for the wicked. For Yehovah will not cast off his people, neither will he forsake his inheritance. For eternal righteousness will return justice, and all the upright in heart shall follow it. Who will rise up for me against the evildoers? Who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity? Unless Yehovah had been my help, my soul would have soon dwelt in silence. If I say, my foot slips, your compassion, O Yehovah, holds me up. When my cares are many within me, your comforts delight my soul. Shall the seed of wickedness have fellowship with you, which frames mischief by statute? They gather themselves together against the soul of a tzaddik and condemn innocent blood. But Yehovah has been my high tower. and my Elohim, the rock of my refuge. And he has brought upon them their own iniquity and will cut them off in their own evil. Yahweh, our Elohim, will cut them off. Okay. So, hopefully you can see right away how this sort of parallels end things. We're going to go to Yeshayahu, Isaiah, and look at something there. I'm going to go to chapter 61. I want to, we may have talked about this already. I don't know. I've brought it up a couple of times over the last couple of months in different settings, but, and many of you know that this is one of my favorite passages of Scripture, because this is where Yeshua, in Luke chapter 4, went to his hometown synagogue, and it appears that it was his turn to read. It says it was his turn to read, so it appears like he was designated as what we call the Ole that day. And that is the person who ascends to the Bima to read from either the Torah or the Haftarah. Now, they did it in a different way back then. They would have multiple people come up and read portions of the Torah and portions of the Haftarah portion until it was all read. But this was Yeshua's turn to read. And so this was a divine appointment. They handed him the Yeshayahu scroll, which means this was the portion designated to be read that day. And so he opened it to Yeshayahu chapter 61, and he read this: "The Ruach of Adonai Yahweh is upon me, because Yahweh has anointed me to bring good tidings unto the humble. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of eyes that are bound, to proclaim the year of the good pleasure of Yahweh, and the day of vengeance of our Elohim." But Yeshua stopped to proclaim the year of the good pleasure of Yahweh. We have a comma in our translation. There is no punctuation in a Hebrew scroll, so you're not going to see that in a Hebrew scroll. And he stopped right there. But the next phrase, V'yom nakam Eloheinu. I'm going to put the Hebrew in there for those of you that are interested in that. Nakam. All right. And so we read in Tehillah 91, God of vengeance, shine forth. And if we were to look at that in the Hebrew, I'm going to go read that to you in the Hebrew. I know it by heart, but I want to read it to you. Again, this is the psalm for the 4th day of the week, which was yesterday. El Nekamot Yahweh, El Nekamot Hufia. That Nekamot is in there twice. El Nekamot, God of vengeance. And then it gives his name, God of vengeance, and then it asks him to shine forth. Okay, and so the point that I'm making is that this statement in the psalm is not just arbitrary, that Elohim has reserved a day of vengeance. And Yeshua clearly came to minister for 2,000 years, and this goes back to what we were talking about in regard to a world week. He came to minister for 2,000 years. The first 2 of the last 3 days of the last days. So we're in the last days, or there were 3 days left when Kepha stood up and said, we are in the last days. God of vengeance, shine forth. El Nekamot Hofia. So can we prove that Elohim is going to take vengeance on the earth? I think anyone who's read the Bible at all understands that Judgment Day is preceded by the wrath of Elohim. He is coming to take his wrath out on the nations that have resisted him for 6,000 years. And so Yeshayahu chapter 61 predicts that. And then we see that actually happening in chapter 63. And a lot of people don't read this because I suppose because there's not a reference to it in a lot of the English Bibles that have concordances and reference scriptures. But look at 63 verse 1. Who is this that comes from Edom with crimson garments of Botzrah? This that is glorious in his apparel, stately in the greatness of his strength. And then there's a quote, I that speak in Tzedakah, mighty to save. And then that ends the quote. And then there's another question from the reader. Why is your apparel red and your garments like his that treads in the wine vat? I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the peoples there was no man with me. Yes, I trod them in my anger and trampled them in my fury, and their lifeblood is dashed against my garments, and I have stained all my raiment. For the day of vengeance that was in my heart and my year of redemption are come. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to stop right there. Obviously, if you want to study this a little bit deeper, you can certainly do that on your own time. But the point that I'm making is this is showing us that the day of vengeance is, and hopefully, if you're a believer in Yeshua, I think that you can see this and see that this is Yeshua. And it's when he comes back. And so if we need to go there, we certainly could go there to the Hitgalut where Yeshua returns in about chapter 19, and he's got a sword coming out of his mouth, and his garments are drenched in blood. So, and it says that he has trampled out the winepress of the wrath of God. So right here, Yeshayahu and the Hitgalut revelation are linked together. And so when we are doing our daily prayers and we get to Wednesday, which was yesterday, we're sort of hearkening ahead to that. We're looking at that in a prophetic way. And it's like I told you last week, doing the prayers and reading these daily prayers sort of set you in a prophetic mindset anyway. El nekamot hofia, hinaseh shofet haaretz, hashev gemul al gehin. Return unto them, unto the proud, their recompense. How long shall the wicked exalt? And of course, right there, does that remind anybody of anything? And I almost hate to ask questions because I know it takes a little while to get the answer, but I just want to see if that verse right there, how long shall the wicked exalt? If that rings a bell with anybody concerning last things. And I'm going to read Joe's comment while hopefully someone comes up with an answer to that. Each time I read them, I see a deeper spiritual meaning. If I have time, I contemplate them on their corresponding days to the World Week. It's amazing how the Tehillim match the Moedim, which match the World Week, which is depicted in the menorah, which is representative of the World Week. Yeah, I know. But the ties are amazing. Indeed, they are. And hopefully other people are seeing that tonight. That all of this is tied to last things. So if nobody thought of it, I kind of hope someone would, but if maybe I'll give it 30 more seconds and see if someone comes up with what I was there we go. Betsy got it. Those who are under the altar having been martyred. Exactly. How long will it be before we are avenged? And that's what that verse right there. How long shall the wicked exult? They gush out, they speak with arrogance. All the workers of iniquity bear themselves loftily. They crush your people, O Yahweh, and afflict your heritage. And the heritage he's talking about right there is Yisrael. And of course, the people that are under the altar are, wow, about 4 of you got it. Hallelujah. So the people that are under the altar are crying out about those who were causing them tribulation, giving them great tribulation. So they say, Yah will not see, neither will the Elohim of Yaakov give heed. That is how arrogant, prideful people who do not believe in Elohim, who do not, or they believe in him. I'm going to say this, and maybe if someone wants me to testify about it, I will. I've told this story before. We have people on here that probably haven't heard it, but I don't know if we need to take the diversion. But They believe in God. There's no such thing as an atheist. That's just ridiculous. That's just a mental exercise that people do in order to make themselves feel better because they know there's a God. Nobody is that stupid. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. So it's absolute arrogance, and because of their arrogance and their hatred for all things good, they kill the righteous ones. And there's this mammoth, gargantuan, epic battle that's been going on since day one. And a lot of people in the believing world don't believe that. They don't believe that there is a spiritual war going on, that there is a contest between us, human beings, and supernatural beings that are using ordinary human beings against us who are supernatural human beings. That's a big mouthful. Does anybody need me to unpack that a little bit? Because I'd be happy to try. But we're in a war. And this war is heading to the place where they're going to kill again. They're going to do it again. They've done it in times past and in pockets all over the world. But this is going to be a global thing where they're just going to kill the righteous that are humble, that are not here for themselves, that are seeking to walk after Yeshua, that are trying to be peaceful and live a clean life. They're going to be killed. And so, yeah, this harkens out to those whose souls are under the altar crying out for the end of these people. And so a lot of people are uncomfortable. I know there's a lot of people over the years that I've counseled to begin to do the daily prayers, and they start reading ones like this, which is called an imprecatory psalm, one that wishes ill on your enemy. They're uncomfortable doing it. And what we have to understand is our first enemy is not flesh and blood. Our first enemy is Hasatan and the powers of this dark world. Okay, so unpack it. Boy, I might have to watch it again to unpack it. So I think basically what I was trying to say is that we are always being opposed by dark forces, and I may not be able to unpack it, Joe. I may have to wait and watch it again to be able to, because I've gone on. Sorry for the lag. So maybe I unpacked it a little bit in the follow-up explanation. So he instructs the nations. Okay, I want to go over that. He planted the ear, shall he not hear? Well, let me back up to verse 8. Consider, you brutish among the people, and you fools. When will you understand? And like I said, a fool says in his heart, there is no God. We are not at war with people per se. The enemy uses people to get at us, but the force behind evil people is what we're actually dealing with. So praying an imprecatory psalm, imprecatory meaning wishing ill upon, we don't do it over human beings unless that human being is attached to that wickedness and doesn't want to give it up. But we're first attacking, everybody knows this scripture in Ephesians chapter 6. I think we read it last week or the week before. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and rulers in the heavenly places. So we're in a fight every day. And so, and I said this last week, by the time you get to the fourth day, and people attested to this, that's when your spiritual vibrance has sort of begun to wane through the week, because the way it works in the Messianic community is we get gassed up on Shabbat. We go in, we hear from Messiah, we enjoy the presence of the brethren, and we get gassed up and we're ready to go. And by about Wednesday, it starts to get a little bit tough in the realm of the spirit. And I'm not talking about just usual workaday life stuff. I'm talking about in the realm of the spirit. And we have to be mindful of that. And that's why Shaul does say that we do not wrestle against these things. And so, and he explains to us, put on the whole armor of Elohim. And so this is what we're talking about in putting on the armor of Elohim, because these things that we've read about, what is that armor? It's the helmet of salvation. That's the knowledge of Yeshua. It's the breastplate of righteousness. That's a consecration, setting ourselves apart. It's the feet that are shod with the preparation of the Besserah. That's studying the scriptures to know how to declare the good news of Messiah. The sword of the Ruach. So, which is the word of Elohim. So this is how we are dressing ourselves, if you will, in the realm of the Ruach in order to get past Wednesday with valiance, with victory, with nitzachon. So, and that's our goal, is to walk, not only to walk uprightly, but to walk in nitzachon, victory. Okay, and so that, I believe, is what these Psalms help us do. And yesterday, I told you many times, for some reason, I'll be doing the daily prayers, and when I get to Wednesday, a lot of times when I get to this one, for some reason, I don't know what it is, but I've been doing this for a long, long time, and Wednesday is the day that usually I get derailed somehow by, not chaotic things sometimes just by busyness, sometimes just forgetfulness, and I skip that prayer. And so I've had to really make a note to myself on Wednesday, you're not going to miss this afternoon prayer. Okay? So let's go back to 9. He that planted the ears, shall he not hear? He that formed the eyes, shall he not see? He that instructs nations, shall he not correct? Even he that teaches man knowledge? Yah knows the thoughts of man, that they are vanity. Happy is the man whom you instruct, O Yehovah, and teach out of your Torah, that you may give him rest from the days of evil, until the pit is digged for the wicked. What does that remind you of? This ought to have everybody chiming in on what that reminds us of. Until a pit is digged for the wicked. Does anybody have any recollection of what that might sound like? Something you read somewhere else in the scriptures? For Yahweh will not cast off his people, neither will he forsake his inheritance. Okay, I'm going to give you half credit for that, Betsy. That's not what I was looking for, but you're headed in the right direction. Well, yes, that is the same place, but I'm looking for other scriptures. Yahweh knows the thoughts of man, that they are vanity. Revelation 21, I think you're on the right track there. Yes, when the people on the last day of the last millennium, they are resurrected and they are cast out. Yes. So, he knows the thoughts of man, that they are vanity. And so 11 and 12 right now minister to me very much, and did yesterday. Yahweh knows the thoughts of man, that they are vanity. Happy is the man whom you instruct, O Yahweh, and teach out of your Torah. And so the mind of a person whose mind is fixed on Hasatan, I just read and it interrupted my thought process. Yes, very good, Jim. The mind of the person whose mind is fixed on Yeshua is at odds with the vain thoughts of most of mankind. And the problem is a lot of people who are believers function still in that mind of vanity. And what is that? Read Ecclesiastes and you'll find out. It's pursuing after your personal wealth. It's pursuing after drugs. It's pursuing after the pleasures of this life. It's pursuing after, all of these things on earth, and not pursuing the kingdom of Elohim, and not obeying his Torah. Look at this. This is almost an echo of Kohelet chapter 12. Happy is the man whom you instruct, O Yahweh, and teach out of your Torah. At the end of Kohelet chapter 12, Kohelet, Shlomo, Solomon says, what makes a whole man is fearing God and keeping his mitzvot, keeping his commandments, following his Torah, basically. And Tehillah 119, a lot of you know this, but Tehillah Psalm 119 is singing the praises of the Torah. Oh, how wonderful is your Torah. How I love your mitzvot. It is life to my bones. I will seek it with my whole heart, just over and over and over and over. And so that is what separates and makes a mind no longer vain or empty or useless, but it makes it attached to the kingdom of God. And it's by that you're listening to his Ruach. And we're going to get into that more later. That you may give him rest from the days of evil until the pit is digged for the wicked. For Yahweh will not cast off his people, neither will he forsake his inheritance. And so that goes back to the fact that Yisrael is the centerpiece of the Hikkalut, the revelation. So it involves the whole world, but what a lot of people don't realize is a third of it is burned up. I personally believe that the third that is destroyed is the third that we live in, which is the Western Hemisphere, basically, mostly North and South America. That's about a third of the earth by my estimation. And so the nations that are in play are primarily Israel and its immediate neighbors around them, and neighbors to the north and neighbors to the east. The neighbors around them to the west are Africa, and they're part of it. The only possible allusion to anything about America would be Tarshish, but that actually is the western boundary of Europe. So I believe that what we're talking about here is primarily Israel, and that during that time, many people will join themselves to Israel. So happy is the people whom you instruct. He will not cast off his people nor forsake his inheritance. For eternal righteousness will return justice, and all the upright in heart shall follow it. What is that talking about? When Messiah comes back, he will restore actual justice. My wife and I went through some difficult things in the beginning of our marriage that had nothing to do with us, but everything to do with someone else. And we were constantly in and out of a courtroom, and it seemed like justice was very, very difficult to achieve. Because we had Elohim on our side, we received justice, but our own lawyers and cops and district attorneys, I should say, they didn't think we were going to get it, because they knew how the justice system worked. And of course, look at what's going on in our nation right now. It's very difficult to get justice, and no one wants to follow the right path to justice. And so when Yeshua comes back, he's going to restore it. And those who are upright in heart will follow it. Then it says, who will rise up against me for evildoers? Who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity? Unless Yahweh had been my help, my soul would have soon dwelt in silence. If I say my foot slips, your compassion, O Yahweh, holds me up. When my cares are many within me, your comforts delight my soul. Shall the seed of wickedness have fellowship with you, which frames mischief by statute? And that, even in Hebrew, that's a tricky phrase. Let me look that up in Hebrew, because I want you to see this. That's the end of verse 20. Yeah, just a system. Yotzeramal alechok. Okay, and so what does that talk? They fashion iniquity, injustice, mischief by statute. And so what does that mean? In other words, they make legal what is unrighteous. They call what is evil good and what is good evil, and they pervert justice. And so I believe that little section of this prayer helps us to get through and to keep looking for the vengeance that Elohim has promised on the wicked, because we are going to be persecuted not only by Hasatan and his minions and the spirits and the prince of the power of the air, but there are simply wicked people out there who are just going to do us wrong simply because we are believers in Messiah. let's see. They gather themselves together against the soul of its Tzaddik and condemn innocent blood. But Yahweh has been my high tower and my Elohim, the rock of my refuge. He has brought upon them their own iniquity and will cut them off in their own evil. Yetzmitim Yahweh Elohim. Elohim, our God, will cut them off. And of course, being cut off is part and parcel to being thrown into the pit, being separated from life and light. So hopefully you see that Tehillah 94, which is our Wednesday prayer, is very, very prophetic in nature and specifically about the last of the last days. I personally think it is. I think it's kind of hard to see it any other way. So that brings us to day 5, which is Tehillah 81 or 2. Let me look. Gotta get my notes back up here. And that's today's. So I'm going to read it in English, and then we're going to go back and talk about the prophetic nature of it. For the leader upon the Gittit by Asaph, sing aloud unto Elohim our strength, shout unto Elohim, the Elohim of Yaakov. Take up the melody and sound the timbrel. The sweet kinor and the nevel. Blast the shofar at the Chodesh at the full moon for our Chag. For it is a statute for Yisrael and the ordinance of the Elohim of Yaakov. He appointed it in Yosef for a testimony when he went forth against the land of Mitzrayim. The speech of one that I knew not did I hear. I removed his shoulder from the burden. His hands were freed from the basket. You did call in trouble. This is my favorite verse, and when we get to the commentary, I'll tell you why. And I rescued you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I proved you at the waters of Meribah, Selah. Hear, O my people, and I will admonish you. O Yisrael, if you would hearken unto me. There shall no strange God be in you, neither shall you worship any foreign God. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you up out of the land of Mitzrayim. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people hearkened not to my voice, and Yisrael would not love me. So I let them go after the stubbornness of their heart, that they might walk in their own counsels. Oh, that my people would hearken unto me, that Israel would walk in my ways. I would soon subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their adversaries. The haters of Yahweh would dwindle away before him, and their punishment would endure forever. They would also be fed with the fat of wheat, and with honey out of the rock would I satisfy you. And so that's where that one ends. And let me get the Hebrew up here. So yes, it's Psalm 81, and it begins, for the leader upon the Gittit. And by the way, there are multiple instruments named in here, and most people don't know what they are. The only one that we're 100% sure of is the kinor, which is a harp. There is the upon the Gittit. That's one that we're not really sure of. And the nevel, we're not 100% sure of what those instruments are. There's really not a good source to tell us. But anyway, by Asaph. So I'm going to read that in Hebrew. Lam natzech al Gittit le Asaph. So it does mean by. In other words, this guy wrote it, but le Asaph. I probably should have just copied it so I wouldn't have to worry about spelling it, but I got it right. Except for the Sophite. There we go. So Asaph, and we might have gone over this. Asaph means gatherer. And so there are, and I've done a brief study on this. I've done a deeper study of it myself, just for my own sake, but because I started noticing, just like there are psalms of ascent, there are imprecatory psalms. The psalms of ascent are named the songs of praise are named. Well, these are named as well, and it's le'asaf, and there's a handful of these, and they all seem to be looking at the gathering, the in-gathering that we pray about, which we're going to get to when we start looking at our daily prayers. They all seem to be about a gathering, and so keep your eyes open for something like that. But it says, sing aloud unto Elohim our strength, shout unto the Elohim of Yaakov. So I've told you, and we're going to get into this later, down the road towards the end of this study, that Yom Teruah is the first day of the 7th month. Well, you're seeing an allusion to, and I told you that Yom Teruah is the one feast that is commanded, but it's not explained, and so therefore it's kind of a chok, a mysterious command that has no explanation. So in that verse it says, Harninu lelohim uzenu hariu lelohei Yaakov. And so when it says hariu, you're actually looking at the same word as teruah. It's just a different conjugation of it because the subject and verb are different, blah, blah. So it's that 1, 2, 3, 4th word from the right. Hariu. That is the same root as teruah. So shout unto the Elohim of Yaakov. There's very few times in Scripture when people are commanded to shout. And one of those was at Jericho, when Yehoshua walked around the city with Israel 7 times, and on one time each day, which is very similar to what we're doing with these prayers. We're walking around the city 1 time each day, you could say, and then at the end we're going to shout. So my personal belief is, and we're going to look at this in depth, is that the the last 7 years of human history starts with a shout. It starts with a teruah, which is also the blast of a shofar. The blast is called teruah as well. So a blast and a shout are the very same thing in Hebrew, and the word is teruah. Hariu lelohim Yaakov. Take up the melody, sound the timbrel, the sweet kinnor with the nevel. And one of the things you see when the shout happens in Hebrew chapter 4 is you see that those who are assembled around the throne are singing and playing harps and singing praises to Elohim. But then it says, blast the shofar at the Chodesh, at the full moon for our Chag. And I want to go over that one because there is some mistranslation of that among Messianic people who just like to superimpose things over the Scriptures that are not there, a lot like other believers do, that they say they're frustrated with, and they do the same exact thing. Tiku b'chodesh shofar, b'keseh leyom chagenu. So, and this is kind of tricky to explain, and there's a lot to it, but I'm just going to give you sort of a summary view of that. Tiku is blast, blow, the shofar b'chodesh, at the Chodesh. And of course, the Chodesh is the renewed moon, but it's also speaking of the whole period of the visibility of that moon. So Chodesh can mean the renewed moon, or it can mean the whole cycle of a particular moon. So Tiku b'chodesh shofar b'keseh leyom chagenu, and that's what a lot of people are mistranslating. They are saying, because keseh does mean to conceal, to hide, but what they don't realize is that the way that this was used in the Mishnah is talking about the fact that the moon is shrouded, covered in light on the 15th day. So it does mean cover, but in this case, it's not the earth covering the moon so that it can't be seen. It's the sun covering the moon in light, because that's what happens on the day of our Chag. So this is 2 things. This is, you blow it at Yom Teruah, and you blow it again at Sukkot. because Yom Teruah is on the Chodesh, and exactly 15 days later, on the 15th of that Chodesh, when that Chodesh, the moon, the Yareach, is completely full, it's covered in light. That's what it's talking about, and that's how it's actually interpreted. That's what that word is interpreted to mean in the Mishnah, is that it's covered in light on the Chag, on the feast day. And there are only 3 days in the scriptures that are called a feast, and that is Pesach, Shavuot, and the first day of Sukkot. So those are our Chagim. So we're going to blow the shofar on the Chodesh, which is, and the only one that we're commanded specifically to blow it on is Yom Teruah. And what I'm talking about is, and this is tricky, and I know it is getting kind of down in the weeds here, but I think it's weeds that we need to pluck out. So Vayikra gives us the feasts. It tells us what his holy days are. And the only things that he lists in there are Shabbat, which we're going to talk about at length here in a little bit, hopefully. So the first thing that he tells us about is Shabbat. Then he tells us about Pesach. Then he tells us about Matzot, which is another 6 days tacked on to the first day of eating Matzot, which is Pesach. So that's 7 days right there. And then he tells us about the first Omer, which we're about to be counting the last Omer. We're about to be we started 40, what day are we on, 48? And then he tells us about Shavuot, which is the first day of the week coming up. It's 3 days from now. And then he tells us about Yom Teruah. And on Yom Teruah, he tells us to blow the shofar. And then he tells us about Yom Kippur. And then he tells us about Sukkot. And then he adds a day to Sukkot, which Sukkot is 7 days long. And he adds a day and calls it Shemini Atzeret, which is the great festivity of the 8th day. And that's it. And nowhere in there does he say to blow the shofar on every new moon, just on the first new moon. Now, Numbers 10, I realize, does say that you blow the shofar on your Chadashim, your new moons. But the only new moons that we're commanded to blow them on are Yom Teruah. But that doesn't mean that they're not blown on other days, because there are, and a lot of people who blow them on the new moon, they think it's compulsory. They go out of their house and they blow the shofar on the new moon. That's fine and dandy for them. If we were in the temple, it would probably be done, because temple worship came along with it, and in the temple it would be done. They would blow it especially on Yom Teruah, and then on Sukkot, you'd also have silver trumpets blowing, you'd have shofars blowing, you'd have everything blowing. The point that I'm making is this is alluding to the fall feast. And it says, it is a statute for Yisrael, an ordinance of the Elohim of Yaakov. And there's that word, chok. Ki chok l'Yisrael. It is a chok. It is an unexplained command. It is a judgment of the Elohim of Yaakov. And then we do some hearkening back. And we did talk about that last week, is prophecy, the prophetic life. We hearken back and then we look forward. We hearken back and then we look forward. We kind of did that in Tehillah 94, but here in 81 we really do it because it specifically brings up the meeting at the mountain. He appointed it in Yosef for a testimony when he went forth against the land of Mitzrayim. So Yosef is the one who was sent down as a prisoner to Mitzrayim, and then he was exalted over Mitzrayim. And then as a result, the Jewish people were brought in, and the Jewish people were used to destroy Mitzrayim. And so he's hearkening back to that. And so the blast of the shofar was part and parcel to that. And what a lot of people don't realize is that that's what Yosef is saying when he tells the people, I want you to bring my bones back to Israel. Why? Because he believed in the resurrection, and he wanted to be by his family. He wanted his body by his family when he was resurrected. And so I believe that's one of the things that it's talking about here. And of course, it says, I removed his shoulder from the burden, his hands were freed from the basket. Of course, that's talking about Messiah or Israel, Moshe freeing Israel from slavery. Messiah frees us from the slavery to sin. You did call, and this is my favorite verse. Batara karatava achalatzecha enecha beseter ra'am efchanecha al merivasela. It's a big mouthful. It's got a rhythm to it. I want to write a song to it. That may be my next song, but I've got another one on the back burner that I need to get to first. But that might, I can feel the rhythm of that verse. I did it by memory. Let me look at it because I want you to see a couple of things here. This is talking about Israel in specific. Okay, and you got to remember, Israel is right now blind, and they're blind on purpose. It's not their fault. God did it to them. He blinded them for the sake of the nations. But it says, concerning last things, Batara karatava achalatzecha. In tribulation you called out, and I snatched you up. You can't get any more clear than that. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. That's a backward-looking thing, but it's also a forward-looking thing, because when we look back at Mount Sinai, at Har Sinai, and we see the Jewish people gathered there, they saw thunder. We talked about this on Shabbat. They looked up into the throne room of God, and they saw thunder. It says they saw, it didn't say lightning, it says they saw thunder. I don't know what that is, but this is phenomenal. But it says, I answered you. You called out to me when you were in distress, in tribulation, and I answered you from the secret place of thunder. All right? We're hearkening back to the mountain, but we're also looking forward. I believe we're looking forward at two things, because you have a natsal, a chalatz, a snatching up of the believers. But this is talking specifically to Israel. You called out to me, and I answered you. I was talking to Israel, and of course Israel is always all of the people of God, even the foreigners who join themselves to her. You called out to me in the secret place of thunder. If you look forward in the book of Revelation, you see again. You see lightnings and thunderings, and you hear shouting. You hear the blast of those shofar. You hear all this same stuff. So we're looking forward to this. He answers us. The point that I'm making is he answers us from his very throne. And when we call out in distress and tribulation, when we call out in tribulation, he is going to answer us. And that, we're going to get to this here in a minute. Well, I don't know if we'll get to it in a minute, but soon, maybe tonight, we're going to get to the point where we're talking about the destination of prayer. And the destination, I'll just go ahead and say it, the destination of prayer is always the throne room. But ultimately, that's our ultimate destination, is to actually be in his throne room. And that's what this is talking about. And then he says, I proved you, that's backward looking, at the waters of Merivah, the waters of strife. If you remember that, you know what it's talking about. It's where they strove with God. I tested you. You strove with me, and I was proving you. I was testing you to see if you're really going to follow me, for one thing. And I believe we all go through that on a personal level. We go through things that we don't understand. He challenges our faith, and Yaakov, I believe it is, either Yaakov or Yochanan tells us that when we suffer tribulation, when we suffer persecution and issues and strife in our life, Elohim is doing that to build our emunah, to strengthen our faith. So then he says, and I want you to hear this in the Hebrew. Shema ami ve'aydabach Yisraelim tishmali. And most of you, I don't know all the names that have joined us tonight. We've got more people here tonight. Hallelujah. And I can't see everybody. I don't know why that is. But Shema, Ami. Hear, O my people. Can you hear the voice of Elohim crying out? Hear, O my people, and I will admonish you. O Yisrael, if you would just hearken to me, if you would just do what I say. That's what hearken means. Shema ami ve'aydabach. Hear, O my people, and I will admonish you. Yisrael im tishmali. If you would just hear and respond. That's what Shema means, is to hear and act. It's not just hear in the sense of hearing a sound. It's hear and invoke a response. So, and this is Elohim crying out to his people to do that. If you do that, then there will be no strange God in you. Neither shall you worship any foreign God. I am Yahweh your Elohim who brought you up out of the land of Mitzrayim. Open your mouth and wide, and I will fill it. And of course, I'm going to do this because I've said this a lot, but I want people to see it, even though it's tiny text. You can copy it and make it bigger if you want to. That's that first word, but I took the bet off. Batzara. Tzara is the word. Batzara karataba achalatzecha. And then Hama alecha me'eretz Mitzrayim. I delivered you. I snatched you up out of the land of Mitzrayim. I want you to see this. Mitzrayim. If you look at the first two letters in Tzara and the second and third letter of Mitzrayim, it's the same letters. And I've taught people this before. Mitzrayim, ayim on the end of a word is always a double. So this is, I've said it this way, it's double trouble. And so Mitzrayim is symbolic of tribulation. So I will deliver you if you just open your mouth. I brought you up out of the land of Mitzrayim. Open your mouth and I will fill it. I'll feed you. I'll take care of you. But my people hearken not to my voice. Yisrael would not love me. That almost breaks my heart when I read it. The Yisrael lo avali. Israel wouldn't love me. Elohim desires our love. The lo shama ami lekoli. They would not listen to my voice. They would not love me. If you don't listen to his voice and do what he says, you don't love him. And Yeshua said this, if you love me, you will keep my mitzvot. So it's amazing that how easy it is for us to not do what he says, to follow after other people and ignore his word. So I let them go, and I want you to think about this. So I let them go after the stubbornness of their heart, that they might walk in their own counsels. Oh, that my people, this one gets me. Lu ami shomeali. Lu ami. Lu is like there's kind of no definition to that word. It's like a beckoning, a crying out. It's almost a mournful dirge type word. Oh, that my people would hearken unto me. That Israel would walk in my ways. I would soon subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their adversaries. Now, this is the psalm for the fifth day. The fifth day started when the Besorah began. And what happened to our Jewish people when the Besorah began? They scattered. They disobeyed. They hardened. Their hearts were hardened. They actually, were instrumental in killing Yeshua. And then, even though thousands of Jews believed, the vast majority of Jewish people did not. And since then, they have been in tzara. They have been in great distress everywhere they go. Okay? It is heartbreaking. And so, if they would just listen to my ways, and the rabbis will tell you that they're doing God's will. But if you study what they've written, they're not doing his will. They're doing the will of the rabbis. And they started that a long, long time ago. They started that before Yeshua showed up. And I believe that's why Yeshua showed up when he did, because they were already... here's the thing. From the time of Moshe until the time of Jeroboam, their issue was idolatry. Back and forth into idolatry, like a washing machine. Just about every cycle was, they're clean for a little while, they're back in idolatry. They're clean for a little while, they're back in idolatry. It went on for about 1,000 years, and then you get to the time of the Maccabees, and they finally clear out the temple. Their idolatry, in one sense, did stop, in the sense that they weren't worshiping other deities like Moloch or Baal or Ishtar or anything like that. But now their idolatry is their rabbis and their doctrines, and they're blind. And so Elohim is saying, if you just cry out, if you just talk to me, listen to me, do what I say, then I'll deliver you. And so I believe that's what we're heading to, and I believe that's what we're seeing in a lot of people in the Jewish community coming to Yeshua. I would soon subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their adversaries. The haters of Yahweh would dwindle away before him, and their punishment would endure forever. They would also be fed. And this flips, and the language here is tricky. I get that, but it's a flip in the language, and it says, the last verse says, Vaya achileu. I would feed him with the fat of wheat. Mechelev chita. Chita is wheat. I would feed him with the fat of wheat, and with honey from the rock would I satisfy you. Aspiyecha, which is satisfaction, fullness. And so, of course, that is a tiny allusion to him feeding us in the Hitgalut. If you look at the tree of life that feeds us, it's very satisfactory. So, Siri thought I called her. So that, any questions or comments about, yes, the remnant was always there. Amen. Any questions or comments about Tehillah 81 before we move on to day 6? Let me get my notes up again. Okay, I'm going to fix this. All right. So, day 6, which is tomorrow, Machar Yom Shishi. Tomorrow is day 6. We will do Tehillah 93. And it's a short one, it's a brief one. But is it possible that this is about the millennium that we live in right now, that we're on the tail end of? And I believe it is. And of course, it does allude to last things, just like all the rest of them do. But let's look at this. Yahweh reigns. He is clothed in majesty. Yahweh is clothed. He has girded himself with strength. Yes, the world is established that it cannot be moved. Your throne is established of old. You are from everlasting. The floods have lifted up, O Yahweh. The floods have lifted up their voice. The floods lift up their roaring. Above the voices of many waters, the mighty breakers of the sea, Yahweh on high is mighty. Your testimonies are very sure. Kodesh, which is set apartness, sacredness, becomes your house, O Yahweh, forevermore. And so this is the last daily prayer before we get to Shabbat. It's on the 6th day of the week, and it says that his throne is established. And so something that I like to meditate on and think about and teach a little bit about, and that is the overlap of days. Like right now, right out, if you look out there, it's almost dark, but it's not. You can't see the sun, but you can see. And so that period is called Bein Ha'arabayim. Dusk is what we say in English, but in Hebrew it means between the evenings, between, it's a between period. And I think that's kind of what this psalm is alluding to. And I think that's kind of where we are almost in time. For us, I believe the sun is going down on this millennium, that we're almost there when it's time to blow the shofar. And we're going to see big things happen. And it says the floods lift up their gates. What is that talking about? They've lifted up their roaring. The mighty breakers of the sea. The voices of many waters. Many waters is oftentimes talking about nations. And I believe that's what it is. Because if you remember in the Hitgalut, all of the nations at the very end, all of the nations of the earth that are still left, because remember, 1/3 of the earth is burned up. All of the nations of the earth are gathering together against Israel. The floods have lifted up their voice. And I believe this is telling Israel to remember his throne is established above. Okay? And then it says, your testimonies are very sure. Kodesh becomes your house, O Yahweh, forevermore. And so one of the things that is echoed in the Hikalut a couple of times is that they overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their confession, the word of their testimonies. That's that last verse in Hebrew. Edotecha, your testimonies. That's the same thing that is talked about over there. They overcome by. They have nitzachon by their confession of Yeshua. And so, and holiness becomes your house, O Yahweh. And of course, that's our destination. I want to go to the house. And you do that by setting yourself apart and being distinct from this world. That was a brief psalm. Are there any questions or comments about that? Why do you believe this one is the tail end of this one? This one what? Oh, you got it. I cleared it up for you before before I saw your question. Okay. Let's see. The end of that one is confusing since it flips. I'm assuming there you're talking about 81, Stephen? Pretty sure that's what you're talking about there. Okay. I'll wait for one or two more comments if they're coming. Otherwise, we're going to jump into Tehillah 92, which is for the seventh day. And of course, I'm looking down because that's where the notes are, and I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the camera. That's where the notes are, and I don't want to miss comments or questions from someone, in case you're wondering. So, Tehillah 92 actually says it. This one was written specifically for Shabbat. A mizmor, a song for Yom HaShabbat. And Yom HaShabbat is the only day in the Bible, let me say it this way, is the only weekday in the Bible that has a name. All the other ones are numbered. I think we went over that, but I just wanted to kind of reinforce that and show you that that's what we're seeing here. A mizmor, which is a melody, a song. Mizmor shir leYom HaShabbat. Shir is song, mizmor is melody. For Yom HaShabbat. It is good to give thanks unto Yahuwah and to sing praises unto your name, O Elyon. Elyon means God Most High. To declare your compassion in the morning and your faithfulness in the night seasons. Here's a couple of instruments mentioned along with the kinnor, which I told you was a harp. I do know what an asor is, but I don't know what it looks like. With an asor, which is a 10-string instrument. That asor is basically eser, the number 10, reconjugated to mean a 10-stringed instrument. Okay? And with a nevel, with a solemn sound upon the kinnor, the harp. Okay, so it's good to sing praises to Elyon in the morning and at night. For you, Yahuwah, have made me glad through your work. I will exult in the works of your hands. How great are your works, O Yahuwah, your thoughts are very deep. I want to stop right there because what this is showing you is, who knows what verses 5 and 6, you have made me glad through your work. I will exult in the works of your hands. How great are your works, O Yahweh, your thoughts are very deep. Why are we doing that on Shabbat? I'll get to your question here in a minute, Jamal. Well, let me go ahead and answer that. Hopefully someone's coming up with an answer to my question. What will Elohim do if we do not blow the shofar at the moon as commanded for certain feasts? Well, Elohim is not up there waiting to strike us dead for not blowing the shofar. Specifically, Israel is supposed to blow the shofar on Yom Teruah. That's the primary one, is to be blown in the temple. All of those feasts are for the purpose of, thank you, Betsy, because that is the answer to the question. All of those feasts are for the purpose of are to be done in Jerusalem, in the temple. And so if we have a shofar and can blow it, we should, but he's not going to hold it against us if we do not, because we're not in the temple anyway. We can't live out these things and fulfill these things because we don't have a temple anyway. But you could say, well, we have we are the temple. Yes, we are. Anytime that we assemble, we are a temple, and so we do blow the shofar at the Chodesh. Hopefully that's sufficient to answer your question there. Okay, so I see some answers coming in. Remembering God because of creation, to celebrate creation and creation. Those are the three that are right. Because if you look at, and we're going to do this again here in just a little bit, if you look at the command for the Sabbath out of Shemot, chapter 20, V'zachoret Yom HaShabbat lekodsho. You shall remember, you shall recall to mind the Sabbath and set it apart. You shall observe it. And he says, because in 6 days Elohim did all his work and he rested on the seventh day, so shall you also rest from all your work on the seventh day. And so the Shabbat, one of the main purposes of Shabbat is remembering. I told you we're talking about commemorating and looking ahead. Remembering, memorializing the Creator and his creation. And we live in a day when most people think that we accidentally got here, that we, and even people who believe in God don't believe that he has the power to create it in 6 days. They think all these brilliant men must be right, and God is wrong. He gave us his word. We believe his word about Yeshua, but we don't believe it about creation. That's hypocrisy. For one thing, that's duplicity. That's doublespeak. That's forked tongue kind of stuff. Either you believe the word or you don't. And the word says very plainly that in 6 days he created the earth and he rested on the seventh day. So shall you rest from all your work. We're imitating God to rest on the seventh day. We're following in his footsteps. So that is one of the major purposes of the Sabbath. And it's no surprise to me that when even believers, it used to be that believers had a modicum of respect for the Sabbath. Even if they kept it on the first day of the week, they would at least not do any work on it. But that started going away in about the 1840s, and then all of a sudden in the mid-1800s, Charles Lyell comes along, and then Darwin follows him, and the next thing you know, you got most of the world not believing in the creation. And of course, I bring this scripture up all the time that was predicted by Kepha, that in the last days they would forget the creation and the flood, because the flood proves the creation, and the age of the earth is young. So one of the major reasons that we as Messianic people need to be keeping the Shabbat is to show the world God rested on this day, so should you. God is the creator of the universe, not you. We didn't climb out of the primordial soup ourselves. He created us. He fashioned man from the dust of the earth and got down close to his face and blew into his nostrils the breath of life. And Adam woke up looking at the face of God. That's beautiful to me. And we obliterated that with our disbelief in the creation. And then it mentions a fool again. A brutish man knows not, neither does a fool understand this. When the wicked spring up as the grass, and when all the workers of iniquity do flourish, is that they may be destroyed forever. And that's something that we, in the day and age that we live in, need to really hang on to. Wicked people will be destroyed. What's this talking about? The brutish man knows not, neither does a fool understand this. A brute and a fool are people who have cast off righteousness and said there is no God. That's who this is talking about. And that's the elite in this world today. Most of them have cast him off. Some of them use his name to pander to the people and make them think they believe in God. And I said that they do believe in God. They do, but they defy him and they don't want to walk in righteousness, and so they're fools. And it says, and we're looking at this, when they spring up as grass and they're flourishing, and right now, that's who's flourishing in this world, is those who want to run over everybody. It is so that they may be destroyed forever. They will have zero excuse before God. Look what he lavished on them. They will have zero excuse and they will be destroyed forever. But you, O Yahweh, are on high forevermore. That's what Elyon means. He is established on high. He is the most high God. For lo, your enemies, O Yahweh, and now mind you, we're talking about the seventh day. And we're looking at the 7th millennium prophetically. And I have said this over and over. That is the day of Yoah, Yom Yoah. Let me put that in there. I've got to put Hebrew back on. Oops, didn't put my Sophite letter. Yom Yoah, the day of the Lord, is not Sunday, it's the 7th millennium. And it starts with Yom Teruah. And so I've said this over and over. When you look at passages about the day of Yah in the prophets, sometimes you see it as this great day of rejoicing and this day of light and gladness and joy and happiness. And then you're reading about the same exact day, the day of Yah, and you're reading about all this destruction and this killing and this dying and death and horribleness. How can we reconcile that? Well, it's because there's two things going on. All of the rejoicing and the happiness and the joy is taking place upstairs, and all of the destruction is taking place downstairs. Plus, and that's just the first 7 years. Plus, then after that beginning in that dusk period, then after that you have most of the 1,000 years where Messiah is ruling on earth and there's shalom on earth, but at the end of it, you have another uprising, and you have all these people out of the northern countries, north of Israel, coming down to Israel, trying to attack Israel and trying to destroy Yeshua himself and resurrected people who've been ministering to them for 1,000 years. It's bizarre. That's the audacity of pride and arrogance in the wicked. They shall perish. The workers of iniquity shall be scattered. That is what happens at the end. At the end of the 7th millennium, that's exactly what happened. The enemies of God perish. And they're scattered. How are they scattered? They're cast out into outer darkness. They're put out forever. But my horn you have exalted like the horn of the wild ox. I am anointed with rich oil. My eye also has gazed on them that lie in wait for me. My ears have heard my desire for the evildoers that rise up against me. This is the encouragement for those of us who go through this stuff. And even though I don't believe we're in tzara right now, we have some tzara right now, we have some tribulation right now, but we're not in the tribulation. We still need to hearken to these things, and we still need to think about the fact that at the end, all these wicked people that do us wrong spiritually, they're gonna get their reward, and that's hard to remember at times, and it's kind of like, how long? Oh yeah, and we get there, and so it's okay to cry out in that sense, because Elohim has written those pleas in His own word. A tzaddik shall flourish like a palm tree; he shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in Beit Yahweh, they shall flourish in the courts of our Elohim. They shall bring forth fruit in old age. They shall be full of sap and richness, to declare that Yahweh is upright, my rock, in whom there is no unrighteousness. And of course, that's hearkening to the end of all things again. Planted in Beit Yahweh, that's what the last city is. That's the house of Elohim, and we're going to live there, and it's going to be established, and there's going to be the tree of life in it, and we're going to eat the fruit of it and never get sick, and we're never going to grow hungry. We're never going to cry again. We're never going to... Oh, my goodness. And that is what Shabbat is reminding us of. So we on Shabbat, we come into our synagogues and we worship and we get refreshed and we fill up with the Ruach, but we know, at Havdalah, that evening, we know that we got to enter back into this dark world. We carry the light of Shabbat, we carry the light of Messiah with us, and we look forward to the vengeance of Elohim. And by the way, Shabbat, the Shabbat millennium, is the day of the vengeance of God as well. Amen. That's me too, Jamal. Any thoughts or questions? I've run out of water and I'm a little parched. I'm going to take a little break here. Might give me a piece of candy to keep my throat going for the next 35 minutes. Oh, I think you do. No, you can hear me that well. Okay. No questions about that? We're going to go on. There's a little bit more to do, and hopefully you're remembering a lot of these things. I know we're moving a little bit fast, but hopefully you're taking notes. You can go back and watch the video later. Incidentally, if you do that, do it on YouTube. Daniel's always got the cure. Thank you, dear. Okay. So I think you guys all see that, what we talked about for Tehillah 92, and actually for all 7 of them. So hopefully when you're doing your daily prayers here on out going forward, if you're not doing them, I encourage you to. Our Siddur, the old one is still available. The new one is not published yet. Our congregation has it, but we can't put it out yet. I may do a digital version of it on Amazon, but we'll see. But if you're not doing the daily prayers, I encourage you to start. And if you are, then while you're doing them, think of these things. And that brings us to the whole liturgy of prayer for every day, including Shabbat. And so I posted on our page, we're going to take a journey tonight. We're talking about the journey of prayer. And so I wanted to do these Psalms first, even though they're last in our Siddur, because first I wanted you to see just how prophetic prayer itself is and how consistent these Psalms are in making us in our daily minds think about the coming of the finality of things and the eternal nature of God's compassion toward us. That was our goal. So going forward, I want you to understand that doing the daily prayers, but the way we're going to do this is there's slight differences between what we do on a daily basis in regard to all the prayers, not just the Psalms, but in regard to all the daily prayers that we do. There's a slight variation or diversion from what we do on Shabbat. But if you look at them, you see that they are very parallel. And so I've mentioned this off the cuff before, but I've never taught it. And I've wanted to teach it. And so when this opportunity came up, I decided to do it here. And that is, and I wish, I'm going to print. Let me see if I can do it right now. If I can do this quickly, I'm going to print an image, and I'll hold it up in front of the camera. I didn't think about that until just now, of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. I know that I have several. I have my favorite one on my desktop. So let me see how quickly I can find these. Here they are. Which one would show it the best? Are y'all okay with that? Taking a little tiny bit of time to print an image of the Mishkan, not the tabernacle, but the temple. I think I'm going to do this one, even though it's not the best one. It shows the whole thing. So let me see how this comes out. I know what I can do. Yeah, I can put it. I think I can do it in the comment. No. It doesn't look like I can put it in a comment. Can't do it there. So let me print it and see what happens. If it doesn't work, oh well. I'll try to get one posted on the website. How's that? if you want to Bing or Google a good image of Solomon's temple, do that. But I'm going to go ahead and do this while we're here. My printer's coming up. It shouldn't take too long. This will work, hopefully. Okay. So the prayers that we do, and again, the way we're going to do this is primarily I'm going to stick with the ones on Shabbat. But understand, I'm going to try to note the differences. We've only got 30 minutes left for tonight, and we're not going to finish this tonight. But we're going to get started. So I'm going to try to note the differences between what we do on Shabbat in the synagogue and what we do in our homes privately in prayer. But they're generally the same, and so it's I said it's a journey, and it really is, and it's a journey to the throne room of Elohim, and it's going to be hard for me to do, perhaps. Let me see. So this is the temple, and the tall part here at the back of it, and this, if I can see, yes, that's the back of it. That's where the Kodesh HaKadashim, the Holy of Holies is, and that represents God's throne. The Ark of the Covenant, the Aron HaBrit, is in that back last room of the sanctuary, and in there is the throne room of Elohim. And what you're seeing right about here is the court of the women, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, let me look at it. Yeah. And then around that is the court of the nations. Gentiles were allowed to a certain point in the temple, but beyond those spots they couldn't go. But this inner court right here is the court of Israel. This one is not the best representation of it, perhaps, but I just wanted you to get a general idea because it's kind of small. But I just want you to understand there are sections to this. And this is what, when Shaul said, I know a man, whether in body or out of body, I do not know, but he went up to the third heaven. Personally, I believe what he was talking about is that spot right there. It's also known as Abraham's bosom. That's where the altar is. If you look down on this, if you could look down on an aerial image of the temple, it looked like a man. It really does. It looks like a human being, a man, and the altar is where the heart of the human being would be. So you can kind of see that if you're seeing this at all. If you can avert, I have the ability to do it in my 3D head. I don't know if y'all can. If you can imagine yourself up directly above it, you can kind of see the human being there. The belly is that inner court, and the arms are sort of up in the air, praising Elohim, and the legs are down on the floor. These will be the legs, and these will be the arms, and this would be the belly, and this would be his head, and of course the throne room is up there in the brain. Okay, so that's why Shaul says, "Keep your mind set on Messiah." That's where you're supposed to make that the throne of God, not your own. Okay, so so I just want you to have those places in mind, and we're going to try to bring those up as we go along. And like I said, we've only got a few minutes here left tonight, but I want to go ahead and get started. So we're on every day when we do our prayers, and every time we do our prayers, it should be that you see yourself on a journey to some degree. And I'm not asking you to go do transcendental meditation and all that kind of garbage, but nonetheless, the main thing to keep in mind is that you're approaching God, and there is a protocol. There is a way to get to it, and your destination, your goal is His throne room. That's ultimately where you want to go. For those of you who attend a synagogue on Shabbat, if it's arranged more accurately, then you're immersed in that journey physically. Although some synagogues don't portray it very well, others do. But you kind of see that, and the Siddur itself is a bit like a roadmap to walk through that journey. So we're basically leaving self and going to the throne room. We're leaving our home down here on earth, and we're going to His house and coming before His throne. That's the goal of our prayers. And so I take that very seriously. When I read out of the Siddur, my goal is not to just sit there and recite prayers. And I can do it from recitation. You've heard some of that tonight. But I try not to do that. I strive not to do that. My goal is to walk the road to Jerusalem, to walk up to the city of Elohim and proceed into his throne room with great awe and fear, and then petition him for things like we read in one of the Psalms, that, I would hear your prayers. If you do these, if you obey the mitzvot, I would hear your prayers. If you would just listen to me, I would free you from your enemies, and all this kind of stuff. So that's my goal, and I'm trying to do that every time I pray. So, and so how do I back this up scripturally? Because I don't want you to think Daniel is just making this stuff up. I'm getting it from scriptures. And I know that there are other people. I don't listen, if you haven't figured it out by now, I don't listen to other teachers. I was taught for years, and I was taught by a rabbi, the Messianic interpretation of scriptures, and I've allowed brothers to influence me and to teach me. But I don't, my point is I'm not out looking for an internet rabbi, and that I'm not trying to provide that here for anybody. I'm trying to just open scriptures to people. But what am I doing? I'm looking in the scriptures, and I'm seeing these things that tie together. And so in the book of Ivrim in Hebrews, it says in chapter 4, verse 14, we have therefore a Kohen Gadol who has ascended into heaven, Yeshua HaMashiach, Ben HaElohim, the Son of God. Let us remain firm in confessing him. The testimony is of Elohim, remember that? For we do not have a Kohen Gadol who cannot share our infirmities. And infirmities means sicknesses. But we have one who was tempted in weaknesses. He was tempted with everything as we are, and yet without sin. So Yeshua had the nature of God in him. He was a human being, though, so he could be tempted. But because the nature of God was in him, he did not sin. Let us therefore come in confidence, since we have a Kohen Gadol like that, one who was perfect. Let us come with confidence to the throne of his compassion, that we may obtain mercy and find compassion to help in time of need. So that should be the goal of our prayer, is to remember that we are going up to a Kohen Gadol. What was the one thing that the Kohen Gadol did for everybody? Because most of the time it wasn't for the whole of everybody. It was Yom Kippur, and it was when he walked into the Kodesh HaKadashim, the most holy place where that Aron, the Ark of the Covenant, sat, and he poured the blood on it. That was the most important thing that he did. As a matter of fact, we'll teach this when we get to Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur. For 7 days, he prepares for that moment, and Yeshua prepared for that moment when he was on earth, and strove to get to that moment when he would shed his blood so that he could then take it to the sanctuary above. And then in chapter 9 of Ivrim, it says, but Mashiach, who had come, became the Kohen Hagadol of the good things which he wrought. And he entered into a greater and more perfect Mishkan. And we're going to talk about that word here in a little bit. Which was not made, and you know that it means temple, which was not made by hands, and was not of this world. And he did not enter with the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered in once into the Beit HaMikdash. There's another word for the temple. This one's in heaven. And obtained for us everlasting redemption. For if the blood of goats and calves and the ashes of a heifer sprinkled on those who are defiled consecrated them even to the cleansing of their flesh, how much more will the blood of Mashiach, who through the eternal Ruach offered himself without blemish to Elohim, purify our conscience from dead works so that we may serve the living Elohim. And so the point of all of this is, I don't understand your question, Jamal. You're going to have to get a little more specific. Yes, this high priest is Yeshua, if that's what your question is. It's talking about Yeshua. He is our Kohen Hagadol, our high priest, and he has already entered up into the sanctuary above. He walked into the most holy place, and whatever the transaction was, he made it, and he made propitiation for us. He gave us the forgiveness of our sins. And so in Yeshayahu, chapter 56, verse 7, it says this. What am I talking about? We're talking about prayer. We're talking about pursuing and the throne room of Elohim being the destination of our daily journey of prayer. And this was posted on the first Siddur that I did. Ki veti beit tefillah yikare lechol ha'amin. Ki veti beit tefillah yikare lechol ha'amin. For my house, a house of prayer, it will be called. My house will be called a house of prayer for all of the peoples. So, and of course, that is talking about Yerushalayim. It is talking about the city of Jerusalem, but more importantly in this context, it is talking about his house up there. It's a house of prayer. If you read the book of Revelation, you see people gathered around the throne. What are they doing? They're praying. What are you seeing? You're seeing the prayers of the Kedoshim rising like incense before the throne of God. Okay? So, prayer in Israel used to be centered around the synagogue and the Beit HaElohim, the house of God. And I think we might have already talked about this tonight. What I'm talking about is the synagogue was, I've already said this, the synagogue was modeled, I think it might have been in my first introduction, was modeled after the temple, but the temple was modeled after the sanctuary above. And I'm going to prove that to you. In Ivrim, Hebrews chapter 8, verse 1. Now, above all, we have a Kohen Gadol who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven, and he has become the minister of the Beit HaKodesh and of the true Mishkan, which Elohim pitched, and not man. Every Kohen Gadol is appointed to offer gifts and sacrifices. Therefore, it is necessary that this man, Yeshua, have something to offer also. For if he were on earth, he would not be a Kohen, because there are Kohanim. In other words, Yeshua is not from the tribe of Yehuda, so he can't be a priest down here. Because there are Kohanim here who offer gifts according to the Torah, who serve the semblance and shadow of heavenly things. Just as it was commanded to Moshe when he was about to make the Mishkan, and here's the kicker, see that you make all things according to the pattern shown you on the mount. So God peeled back the curtain and showed him heaven, and Moshe took notes, drew a picture, recorded it in his toolbox, however it happened practically. And so the tabernacle was fashioned after heaven. And when David desired to build a house for Elohim, the same thing happened. He set the plans for the house and gave them to Shlomo, Solomon, his son, to build the house. But both of those and the second temple that Ezra built were fashioned after what is in heaven, the throne room of Elohim. And so what you see in a model of the temple is a replica of what is up in heaven, the throne room, approaching the throne room of Elohim. So in our Siddur, and in any good Jewish Siddur, it is a roadmap to that throne. It is a plan. It is an architectural plan. It's Google Maps for the throne. And that's in individual prayer and in communal prayer, like I've already mentioned. And if you look at Yeshua's prayer that he gave to the Talmidim, and it's called the Prayer of the Talmidim, the Talmidim's Prayer. Everybody knows it in English. Some of the people that are watching, because I can see some of your names, you know it in Hebrew. Avinu shebashamayim yitkadesh shimcha, tavo machotecha ye'aseh ratzonach kevashamayim gam ba'aretz. Our Father who is in heaven, set apart, hallowed, consecrated is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us the bread we need today. So it's a little tiny microcosm of what we're talking about in regard to approaching Elohim. And so the individual prayers of daily prayers in the Siddur are catered to, or tailored to, I should say, the individual and the needs of an individual apart from the body of Messiah. Whereas the prayers that are set down on Shabbat, even though some of them are identical, are geared toward communal prayers, community, fellowship, prayers of fellowship and assembly. Those are geared toward the body, but they're very, very similar. The exception is in the individual prayers, there is no Torah ceremony, but there is the approach to the throne room, which is what the opening of the ark in a synagogue is. When you open the ark, it's like, oh, kavod, glory. You see that in the individual daily prayers when we quote out of, I believe it's Yeshayahu, Kadosh, 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 Yahweh Tzevaot Melech Kol Haaretz Kevodo. Holy, holy, holy is Yahweh Almighty, who was and is to come. The whole earth is filled with His glory. So when you get there, you've gotten to the throne room. Okay, tonight we're going to walk through, like I said, mostly the communal prayers of Shabbat and see how they take us up to the Mishkan. So it looks like we're not going to get very far. My intro has lasted for almost 15 minutes. So we only have a few minutes left to do this. So I think I'm going to go ahead and start, though. So in our Siddur on page 3 and on 98, that's where the prayers begin. And so you've gotten up and it's time, and if you've gone to the synagogue for prayers, you've probably already done your prayers in the morning at home, but if you're going to the synagogue, then when you get there, before the service starts, we're going to do this. We're going to put on our talit. But in the daily prayers, what we do first is we arise, and we'll do this on Shabbat morning before we assemble together. We arise, we acknowledge the Creator, and you'll see this in the Siddur. We'll remind ourselves to be clean, and we do that by quoting Psalms about washing and having clean hands and a pure heart. I made a note of this. Jewish people will do that in a compulsory way. In other words, they believe they must go and wash and say the blessing over the hand washing. And I don't believe that is compulsory. I don't believe it's required of God that we do that. But certainly the notion that we should be clean before God, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to do a ritual hand washing in order to just bring it into your world. But I don't believe that is compulsory. As a matter of fact, Yeshua had an argument with the Pharisees about that. They're eating without their hands washed. But the symbolism of it is good. And my grandfather, I used to hear this story a lot. My grandfather washed his hands and face every morning simply because he thought it would wake him up. And so I tend not to do that. My remedy for waking up is coffee. And that's my destination when I get up is to go have that cup of coffee. I see your question, Tavo, and I will get to it here in just a minute. So we do in our daily life, in our daily prayers on Shabbat, we will do that in our homes. But when we get to the Sabbath, when we get to Shabbat, when we get to the synagogue, we're also going to wrap ourselves in our talit there. And the purpose of the talit is to bear up the tzitziot. And we've only got 10 minutes left, but I'm going to go ahead and do a little mini teaching about that. So the tzitziot are the strings that are on the talit, and the talit is the garment that bears them up. So we are commanded in the scriptures in Bamidbar chapter 15. I'm just going to go straight there. I didn't paste that in my notes, so I'm going to go there. I think I was going to look at it in the Siddur, but I'm going to do it slightly differently. And it starts in verse 37. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that this came on the heels of someone breaking the Sabbath. And so they didn't know what to do with a person who broke the Sabbath, and the punishment was death. This man went out and worked on the Sabbath. He bore a burden, which God said over in Shemot in Exodus to not to bear a burden on Shabbat, not to do any of your regular work. In other words, what you do to produce your living, you should not do on Shabbat. What you do to increase your own kingdom, you should not do on Shabbat. And then he further says, do not bear a burden. In other words, don't stress your body out with a heavy load. And so that's what this guy was doing. It wasn't the specifics of picking up sticks. It was the fact that he was picking up more than one or two or three or whatever, and I suppose that's a relative term as far as what's heavy for one person might not be heavy for another. The rabbis get all twisted up and overly zealous about trying to keep people from doing that they make it very difficult to do anything on Shabbat. You can't even put on your socks in some communities. It's ridiculous what they do. But nonetheless, this guy had done that, and his punishment was death. And so to keep people from dying, Elohim commanded the tzitziot. In verse 37, and Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, Speak unto Bnei Yisrael, and bid them that they make them throughout their generations tzitzit, in the kanfot of their garments, the corners of their garments. I'm going to get my talit here because I want you to see that specifically. And it looks like I've got a question about that. So this is the kanaf. Kanfot is the plural. This is the kanaf. This is the corner of the garment. And so that's why on Shabbat I will only wear this. I'm going to get to your question, Joe, but I will only wear this on Shabbat because it says on the four corners of your garment. And if I wear them in any other way and put on a talit, and I'm wearing on 8 corners of my garment, I'm not going to do that. He said to wear 4 of these, basically. So here's what it is. It shall be unto you for a tzitzit, and a tzitzit is a blossom, a bloom, an outburst of life. It's the bud of a flower, okay? There are some people, and it's possible, who think that in antiquity they did wear a tzitz, but it was short, and it was fat, and it was more like a blossom, almost like a Scottish thistle, if you can imagine that. I'm a Scotsman, so I know what a thistle looks like. Some of you may not, but an upside-down thistle hanging off your garment on the corners. Some people think that that's how big the tzitz was back in the day. We have our Jewish people who have been wearing them since times of antiquity, and they may have been bigger than this, but over the age, what we have inherited from them that we can physically see with our eyes are these. And so this is satisfactory to me. It shall be to you for a tzitz, that you may look upon it and remember all of the mitzvot of Yahweh and do them, that you go not about after your own heart and with your own eyes after which you used to go astray. That you may remember and do all my mitzvot and be kadosh unto your Elohim. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim to be your Elohim. I am Yahweh your Elohim. So he says twice after giving this command, I am Yahweh your Elohim. I am your God. After giving this command. So obviously this is a very important thing, and like I said, it's to rescue us from death. So it's to remind us of all of the mitzvot. Excuse me there, my throat's getting me a little. So the first thing we do in our prayers is get ready to leave the house, and what I'm talking about is this house in a figurative or symbolic sense. To get ready to leave and go up into the throne room, you have to be properly dressed. Okay, so I'm going to get to some questions because I've had a couple of questions. So let me look here. I had one from, okay. Where can we learn more about that? I've been trying to track down that sermon for quite some time now and haven't been able to find it. I can't help you there. I don't know if you know it, Tavo, but I left Bation, and I don't know what they've done with the videos. But where did I learn that? So I would have to maybe, I don't know, maybe we could do a phone call or something, and I could tell you, because it just has to be derived from scriptures. It can be done straight out of the scriptures, but primarily, just do a search on the tree in the scriptures, because 4 times, it's the only times that it specifically says what Yeshua hung on in the scriptures. And every time it says that he hung on it wasn't a cross, it was a tree. So you have, and that's even in the Greek. So you're looking at the Greek scriptures, which to me are a little weak. They're not bad, but they're weak. And you have in there that 4 times Every time it says what he hung on a tree. He carried a staros in the Greek. He carried a talav in the Aramaic. And both of those words, both the Greek and the Aramaic, mean a stake or a beam. He didn't carry a tav, which is a tau, which is the Greek word for cross, which is not in the Bible. So it's easy to do. But then what you have to do is look, and I believe it's in the book of Yochanan, where it says that they went past Yeshua. So that when you look at that language, then you see clearly that all three of them were hanging on the same tree. So we can talk offline. Maybe send me a Facebook message later. It is the same idea, Joe, with the talit on the belt loops, but for me, it's personal for me because, and I think I've said this in another testimony, I don't remember, but before I even owned the talit, when this was 12, 13 years ago, when I had taught a Bible study for 8 years and it was turning into a congregation, and Hasatan was fighting it at every turn, go figure. I got down on my face to pray, and I was compelled. There was a throw over the back of the chair that I was kneeling in front of, and I was compelled, and I believe it was the Ruach HaKodesh, I was compelled to just grab that throw and put it over my head, because I could see Eliyahu praying under his mantle, and I could see David praying under his mantle, and I just reached and grabbed it. And I'm not putting any weight on a garment per se, but the obedience of having it on a four-cornered garment. Your jeans don't have four corners. They do in sort of a topographical sense, if that's the right word, maybe a geographical, maybe I'm looking for a word that I don't think I found it yet. But they don't in the sense of a corner. Okay, and it also represents wing, and I guess this is probably where we'll have to stop. When I throw this on in the morning, there's one of the verses that we're saying. Let me just get my Siddur up so I can tell you what page it's on. That's preparatory for putting on the talit. I'm gonna have to go to the daily prayers. Barchi nafshi et Yahweh Elohai gadal me'od hod vehadal avashta ote or kasama note shemayim kairi. I didn't open this door. I just did it by memory. He spreads out heavens like he spreads out the heavens like the curtains. Okay, and so that's what it reminds me of. And I'm saying that prayer as I'm spreading out my talit, and then one of the prayers that we pray is that he covers us in the shadow of his wings. So it's very symbolic of the Ruach HaKodesh wrapping me up. And so that's why I do it with a talit. When I do my morning prayers, I do not have belt loop tzitziot. I wear belt loop tzitziot at times, but not during prayer. So I encourage you to think about it. I'm not mandating it for you. But it does, so the word there is me'il and abaya, I believe, are the two words that are used for mantle or garment, outer garment, the garment in which you wrap yourself. Put the tzitziot on the garment in which you wrap yourself. And so that's why I do it. We're out of time. Hopefully that was a sufficient answer for your question. Is there anything else? We got 1 minute left. Thank you, Maureen, for that page reference. We'll probably do it next week anyway. Yes, and one thing that I notice is because I start my prayers, there's a couple of prayers that I pray before wrapping myself in the talit. And once I put on the talit, then the sound changes. It's really cool. It's like going into your closet. It's like making it more private and making it more intimate with God. Because I do vocalize my prayers. I don't just think them. I say them. Anything else? We got a minute. Make sure I didn't miss anything. It was the woman with the blood issue touched to be healed. Yes, Yeshua was walking by. The woman was down on her hands and knees. His talit was his me'il, his outer garment, his mantle was wrapped around him. And this was probably pretty close to the ground, but it says in one of the places, because there's multiple accounts of that, In one of the places, it actually says that she touches his kanaf, and she was healed. And just so to wrap it up, the sun, S-U-N, Shemesh, the sun in the sky, of tzedakah, righteousness, will arise with healing in his knafim. Might be feminine, kanfot. I believe it is feminine, kanfot. Healing in his wings. And so the scripture that Maureen brings up is very significant in that regard, in that the woman with the issue of blood, who bled for 12 years and went to all the doctors and they couldn't heal her, reached up and touched this, and she was healed. And it says that he will arise, the Messiah will arise with healing in his wings. And this is a wing, and we're going to talk more about that next week. Shalom, shalom. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope, remember, if you're going to go back to it and watch it again, and I think a lot of you do, please do that on the YouTube site. I need to drive my viewership up, the watch time up over there to get mainly to get my own little cool address for that site, but also just to help drive up the viewership over there, share it with people. So I'm glad you joined us tonight. Shalom, shalom. We will see you next week, hopefully on Shabbat if you're part of our congregation. Shalom, shalom.